we would like to take this opportunity to introduce ourselves. My name is Katie and Kelly, and I'm an associate director with the AMA staff. I am one of the leads for the 11, 13, 17 team, as well as been working closely with the AMA COVID-19 team in regards to the questions and answers from the membership. So with that, I will pass it to DJ Brown.
Hello everyone, DJ Brown. I'm an Associate Director of Academic and Membership Affairs and serve as a co-lead for the 11, 13, 17 team. Jeff, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, thank you, DJ. Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Thunsell. I'm an Associate Director in Academic and Membership Affairs, where I serve as a member of the 11, 13, 17 team and provide support to the Division I Football Oversight Committee. PJ?
Thanks, Jeff. PJ Hubert, Assistant Director in AMA, primary roles, 11, 13, 17 team member, 4-4 transfer team member, and also serve as a support liaison to the Men's Basketball Oversight Committee. I'll turn it over to Ann.
Thanks, PJ. I'm Ann Rollman. I'm an Associate Director with AMA. My typical job duties include overseeing the Division I legislative process. I also serve as a liaison to the Legislative Committee and to the Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sport Committee. So if I use CSMAS, that's the acronym that I am referring to. I'm also serving on our internal playing and practice season working group. So if you've heard about that or have questions specific to that, I can help with those. Also, I just want to give a shout out. Looks like we've got 400, almost 410 participants today. Amanda Patterson, thanks for joining us. It's got to be about 6 a.m. Hawaii time. Jenna, I see you out there. Hopefully it's not too hot in Texas. And then it's really great to see Megan Kasabian on this call. We miss you here at the national office. So desperately missing all of your faces, but really glad you could join us today. I wanted to extend just a general thank you to everyone. I think it's really important to take some time during all of this to share gratitude for what you all are doing and supporting your coaches, your administrators, and then obviously, most importantly, your student athletes during this weird, chaotic, and certainly difficult time. So in that kind of message, we're hopeful that you can help us help you. And thank you for your patience as we work through all of the questions that we've received. I would just like to take a note and say that the existing Q&A, which hopefully you are all very familiar with, has over 100 questions specific to 11, 13, 17. So obviously this is an area of much interest and confusion. So we really appreciate everything you've done to let us know where you need the most help. I think with that, I will then turn it to DJ, who is going to start us off with Bylaw 11. We'll start there, take any kind of questions that you might have, again, through that chat functionality, and work through those questions and then move along. I assume if we get through quickly, we can always come back. So if you miss your opportunity to ask that Bylaw 11 question, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to come back to it at the end. So with that, DJ, it's all yours.
All right, Ann. So thank you, everyone. We had sent an email to all of the participants last week asking for questions that the membership wanted covered during this session. So the first question that we have comes to us, and it asks, may an institution use temporary replacement to replace a coach who has contracted COVID-19 and is in quarantine or recovering from the virus?
Well, this is Katie Ann speaking, and we've obviously had a lot of questions as it pertains to Bylaw 11 specific to the COVID space and prior to COVID-19, just utilizing the replace coach legislation. We do have a regional rules seminar that will be available specific to the Bylaw 11 space in general. But for this specific question, this is obviously an area that the institution is able to utilize their local decision-making in regards to a coaching staff member or an institutional staff member with sport-specific responsibilities being in a situation where they have COVID-19. So as it pertains, the short answer to that question is yes, the institution is permitted to utilize the replace coach legislation in those types of scenarios.
Thanks, Kadian. I just say we haven't received any questions from you all yet, so again, encourage you guys to do that. We'll sort through them. The other update beyond kind of the replacement issue that Kadian was just discussing, I did want to let everyone know that the CSMAS subcommittee that's been addressing many of the pertinent health and safety issues surrounding COVID-specific issues has started talking about general personnel issues. There's some recognition, right, that folks are short-staffed, that maybe not everyone is back on campus, or maybe not everyone is allowed to be in the same room at the same time, or any variety of those issues. So just an update, nothing firm yet, but that group did start talking about that issue on Wednesday, and may have some more considerations, I guess would be the right way of saying it, some considerations as folks think about flexibility for personnel limitations when working with our student athletes. So saying that might get some questions flowing too. If not, we'll keep moving.
Okay, so we had another question pop up that related to any type of flexibility or blanket waivers for furloughed coaches that are not able to work for the institution, and whether they would be able to have flexibility either through the interpretive process or through the waiver process at this point in time to work camps and clinics that include prospective student athletes. So at this point in time, we haven't seen a blanket waiver request related to furloughed coaches. We have heard from the membership a significant number of inquiries related to working camps and clinics during the dead period that include prospective student athletes. And at this point in time, we haven't provided any flexibility in that space. But I will say that we are continuing to work with the Office of Legal Affairs as it relates to Bylaw 11 in general to look for and identify some spaces where flexibility may exist moving forward as it relates to humanitarian benefits. So being provided to individuals who have been furloughed or volunteer coaches, things like that. So we are anticipating some updated language in the next couple of weeks related to what institutions or institutional staff members may be able to assist their fellow employees that would provide some limited flexibility there.
Great, thanks, DJ. I'm going to take a question from Matt, specifically on any update on if coaches will be allowed to participate in voluntary activities. It's a good question, and one that the subcommittee was certainly discussing. They talked about whether or not that made sense in the context of health and safety issues, and generally talked about saying that it made more sense to make sure that folks with sort of health and safety training, CPR, AED training could be available during voluntary activities or otherwise. This discussion was sort of around that limit of 5 strength and conditioning coaches for football. So all I can say right now is that certainly is a topic that group is discussing and will provide their feedback. That's only one input mechanism, and that input will be provided to AMA staff to consider potential waivers or interpretive flexibility. So we're waiting on their final health and safety feedback, which again should happen in the middle of next week. So we should be able to get you some more information shortly. With that, I'm actually going to now turn it back to TJ to address a slightly different issue.
Thanks, Ann. So another question that came in was related to, can we speak on a little bit related to the time frame of the recruiting dead period, August visits, restrictions on visits based on institutions opening up? So I think this question's a little bit more involved at this point than what we may have answers for. So as you all are probably aware, the temporary recruiting dead period runs through July 31st. From a basketball perspective, I can provide some insight on what the oversight committee, MBOC, has been looking at. And I will just kind of make everybody aware that the council meeting that took place this week on Wednesday, there is another meeting in the works to be set up for next week to discuss a little bit further about the recruiting calendars, specifically or especially for the men's side. So what I can share right now is that there are a few models being discussed by the Oversight Committee or that they have recommended for council review and potential action. So one of those includes having August as a full-on quiet period, which would allow for visits to occur. Now, I would preface all of that on, if you've been reading the COVID Q&A, a lot of the answers are, kind of end with based on local or state governments and if your state is opened up or if your institutions are opened up. So it becomes a little bit more of kind of discretion between your institutions and states and where you're at with the phasing of the opening process. So I think that question is a little bit more of a stay tuned from a basketball perspective, but hopefully that provides a little insight as to where folks are thinking as we get into next week.
Thanks, TJ. This is Jeff, and I'll just provide an update from a Football Oversight Committee standpoint as it relates to the recruiting calendar. At this point, there has not been any discussion as far as potential modifications after, if the dead period isn't extended again through July. In football, August is already a dead period the entire month. It's possible at some point that the Football Oversight Committee could look at the recruiting calendar given the adjustments that were made in the spring and summer for this year. But at this point, the committee's focus has been, I guess, laser focused, as you could say, in many ways on the summer access and preseason model that was just approved this week. So stay tuned on that one, and you'll receive additional updates as they come.
There's one general question that I'd like to take a stab at answering, and I invite DJ and the rest of the team to weigh in. The question was about, there's a lot of decision makers, there's a lot of decisions being made, AMA, the council, the 3C, SSI, et cetera. How is that collaboration taking place, and then how can you all make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date and accurate information? That is a really great question, and one, to be very honest and transparent with you, that we're struggling with internally to make sure we're staying on top of all the moving pieces. My recommendation, which I hope most of you are already doing, is staying on top of the resources that are available on the ncaa.org COVID-19 page. On that website, so it's that kind of like, if you just go to ncaa.org and that COVID-19 banner pops up, if you click on that, you go to the kind of coronavirus NCAA webpage. If you scroll down on that webpage, there's something called a box called Division I COVID-19 resources. And in that box, it lists two things which are certainly essential, the Division I COVID-19 action chart and the Division I COVID-19 Q&A. So again, you're likely very familiar with the question and answer guide. The action chart came out a little bit later. I'm trying my best, I'm responsible for updating that, but that should collapse all of the decisions that are made regarding any kind of waiver, legislative action, those types of issues that are being decided either at the committee level or at the council or 3C level. So that is being updated weekly alongside the question and answer guide. To me, that's one of the best places to keep track of all of the action that is happening, so that you will know at least weekly a summary of everything that has occurred. The other piece of information that I think is critically important on this website is in the middle, there's something called campus resources. and that lists the core principles of the resocialization of collegiate sport and the frequently asked questions, and then the action plan considerations. So the way that I try to conceptualize everything in my head is that if it's really kind of broadly coronavirus, health-related, specific to that, you go to those campus resources. That's guidance that's been developed by the COVID action team, which includes folks outside of the NCAA who have that type of specialty. And then if you need information on actual action that's taken place, you go to the action chart. If you need help with flexibility, interpretations, that's when you go to the question and answer guide. So if you're staying on top of those three things, I think that you're going to be doing a pretty good job of being at the forefront of that information. And then finally, work with your conferences to get any of that council-specific information, maybe the updates coming out of the Wednesday 3C meetings, and then certainly key items coming out of the council report. So you got to work with your conference office maybe to get some of that information. But really good question. It's really hard to keep your arms around, and hopefully that's a starting point.
Thanks, Anne. We did get another question that came in regards to the NCAA staff and recommendations on administering this year's recruiting exam remotely. So in this space, we have obviously provided that guidance within the Q&A document to indicate that institutions are able to work with their conference offices in regards to adjusting the conference policy and how to administer the recruiting exam. So our best advice in this space, again, is to just utilize your local decision-making on your campuses and within your conference and how to best approach working with your coaches to ensure that they're able to complete the exam for this year. If there are specific questions and concerns in regards to how to administer those exams virtually, please don't hesitate to contact either DJ or myself, or submit that in RSRO for us to be able to provide additional guidance. But in short, please use your decision-making on your campuses in order to make sure the coaches are able to complete their exam.
Thanks, Kavian. I'm going to take the next one here. The question from Donna, thank you, Donna, will be, will the Division I Council be considering flexibility to fall start dates at their next meeting? So you may have heard following the council meeting this week that there was some discussion about two concepts specific to non-football fall sports, one coming from our coaches associations of those sports. They asked to allow coaches to be involved in individual workouts with their team sports student athletes, so basically an extension of the individual sport exception. So technically it would still be voluntary activity, but a student athlete could request a coach to be involved. So that was one concept under consideration. A second concept was from the ACC, which would allow those fall sports, again, other than football, to have a version of summer access, very similar to the standard summer access that we're used to with football and basketball. And the ACC's concept, that would start July 15. Those two concepts were considered. The council felt like they just didn't have quite enough time to vet that with their memberships and figure out where folks were on that issue. And so along with a couple of other items, they elected to defer those two items to their call on the 25th, so next week. Donna, as part of that, they have not yet seen an official concept about moving the start dates for preseason. That certainly has come up generally, but that has not been a specific concept for consideration. So right now, the only two things that they will talk about next week, to my knowledge, and this can always change, is the Coaches Association concept about extending that individual sport exception to team sports, and then the ACC summer access for all fall sports.
Okay, thanks, Dan, for that follow-up. We had another question as well related to, can the staff provide some context related to the extension of the CCACA waiver that allows for 8 hours of virtual non-physical activity that is required with that can be required with student athletes each week through the month of July. Jeff, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you to start off from a football perspective.
Thanks, DJ. So from a football standpoint, I guess when you look at the summer access and preseason model that was adopted this week, and some of you may have seen the comments from our oversight committee chair, Shane Lyons, the AD at West Virginia, that this was a plan designed that the committee felt was in the best interest of student athletes, and also struck an appropriate balance, recognizing that there would be discrepancy across the membership in terms of the timing of when institutions would be able to return. Even in the voluntary activity space, when you look at when that was opened up on June 1st, some institutions returned right away, some waited a week or two, some haven't returned at all. And so the idea behind that is that if summer access segments were going to begin July 13th, if your first contest is September 5th, and perhaps earlier if you play that Thursday or have a week 0 game, that for those institutions that aren't able to return due to health considerations in their area or on their campus, the idea of the extension was to at least provide them with an opportunity to continue to have those virtual activities. So they wouldn't be cut off during the month of July while some of their counterparts were already back on campus and getting ready to start summer access. And PJ, I don't know if you wanted to add anything from a basketball standpoint.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks. And I'll kind of echo what Jeff said. And there were a handful of models that were considered from a basketball perspective related to almost like a phased-in approach leading up to summer access, then your out of season, academic year practice and preseason practice. So first and foremost, the health, safety, and well-being of our student athletes, coaches, and anybody that would be involved was at the forefront. So extending this voluntary piece from what's going on now in June to in men's and women's basketball to July 19th before we would start summer access on the 20th was basically keeping that in mind. We have some schools that, like Jeff said, are started voluntary activities and everything, and institutions in their states are opening up, but we still have some that aren't, and we still have student athletes that maybe don't feel comfortable being on campus yet. So the committee and ultimately in council amended the model the other day and adopted what we have now for the basketball space is really the most flexible approach for our student athletes in mind, in a sort of flexible phased-in approach, at least getting us through mid to late July before summer access would occur.
All right, perfect. Thanks, PJ. So we have another question that came in, and we've gotten this question a couple times in regards to older information that is remaining in the Q&A document once it's released on a weekly basis. And essentially, we are working to develop a potentially 2.0 that will remove any of the information that is no longer applicable, as the coordination committee, council, as well as the council committees are making decisions and updating information based off of any waivers. And as that happens, what we've kind of decided initially was to leave information so that as the membership is able to reference back to where we initially were starting off, versus removing information out and potentially having to either answer those questions again or creating any additional confusion. So we do understand that having the older information, how that could present confusion from the membership standpoint, but we are working to be able to develop something that is obviously going to be eliminate any of that older information. And we're collaborating with a couple other organizations to make sure that we're able to address the change appropriately and again, to eliminate any additional confusion from removing information from the document. So if you all have any suggestions, whether it be a strike-through approach of old information or completely removing the previous question out of the document, please don't hesitate to work with your conferences and or reach out to us to be able to have those recommendations as we look to establish a newer version of the Q&A.
DJ, I think I'd like to echo that work and understand that some of the reason why questions that first appeared in the Q&A document continue to exist is because they're explaining the base rule prior to any flexibility being provided by the council or as part of a waiver process, which presumably will expire at some point in time. So question number 2 in the recruiting section related to telephone calls, the base rule still continues to apply. However, later on in another section, there's information to indicate that during the COVID-19 temporary recruiting dead period, there's more flexibility during that specific period of time. So hopefully that helps provide a little bit additional context as to why the Q&A is structured the way that it is at this point in time. But as Katie said, we continue to look at and evaluate opportunities to streamline that information to make it more readable and digestible for the membership.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and address one question that just came in about the waiver for the football roster preseason or the preseason participant limit. That was waived to lift that limit of 110 participants. The question was whether it could be only used for student athletes who are in the locale of the institution during summer access and not apply to student athletes who return for the start of the preseason. And really the rationale here is it's intended to be flexible. In the recommendation that the Football Oversight Committee made to the Division I Council, the committee noted that it would permit football student athletes who do return for the summer to remain in the locale and participate in preseason practice instead of departing the locale and then returning once the limit of 110 no longer applies. While that rationale was stated in the recommendation and in the report from the Oversight Committee June 4th video conference, it's not intended to in any way limit individuals who weren't there as part of summer access. It's designed to be flexible to allow institutions to exceed the 110, whether it's with individuals who were there during the summer or individuals who are coming for preseason.
All right, this is Anne again. I'm going to do my best to address a few questions that are in here that are follow-ups. Mo, I think what you're asking is there's action taken to extend the virtual CARA waiver, and then you said for sports other than football and basketball. That's right. That's addressed in their specific models. So right now, the only thing that is permissible for fall sports other than football would be in-person voluntary activities if your institution is allowing them, and then certainly what the waiver allows, which is the 8 hours of virtual CARA. So hopefully that answers that question for you. Another question that we received was specific to, or maybe this is more of a comment, which I totally understand, which is specific to the start date for fall sports. So the comment was generally about, you know, this can impact a whole lot for your student athletes trying to get back to campus. International students, I-20 issues, flying, all of those things. And as I said before, at this point, the council does not have a concept in front of them that they're considering regarding changing those preseason start dates. The only thing is potentially discussing that July 15th ACC concept to start summer access. I think the points you made will certainly be part of the council discussion, as they recognize it would be very difficult to change things as we get later into the summer. One other question that's come up, and DJ, if you'd like to collaborate on this one, I welcome you, but the question was about modifying or eliminating the 132-144 declared season. This is something that the Health and Safety Subcommittee, the CSMAS Subcommittee, has talked about generally and trying to determine if something like that is necessary from a health and safety perspective. I can tell you that, again, they're still finalizing their feedback, but there was little to no support for that concept from a health and safety perspective. The assumption there was there is still sufficient amount of time to transition student athlete safely back into quote unquote playing shape, and that adding additional days for student athletes who may not actually be at the height of their fitness levels could be more harmful than helpful. So if there are very specific issues based on things that institutions are experiencing, I think we encourage you to continue to collaborate with your conferences and potentially, if there's something really, really unique, potentially a waiver. But again, that feedback from the health and safety group will be finalized next week. DJ, anything else on that?
And you did a really nice job hitting on all of the key points. I think I would echo that. As staff, we continue to hear from the membership on a daily basis through other cases that we're working on with RSRO in terms of great ideas, great concepts that you all have. We would encourage you to work with your peers at other institutions, work with your conference offices to vet those concepts out and continue to build those concepts so that we as a staff are looking at potentially putting one or two models forward in terms of the governance work that we do with the standing committees, as opposed to 5 or 6 different options that are coming in from individual member institutions or individual conferences. So trying to build support from within the membership is a really important part to that process as we look at COVID-19 and this summer transitioning back into the fall and what the fall and academic year potentially looks like.
One more follow-up. We got another clarification on, say, for example, soccer, so a non-football fall sport. And the concern was we're only allowed the 8 hours of virtual contact and there is no voluntary training opportunities. That actually is not right. So currently, voluntary activities are permissible from an NCAA perspective. Of course, at the institutional level or the state level, you may have guidelines or policies that are preventing that from happening. But from the NCAA level, voluntary activities are currently permissible and were permissible starting June 1st. So right now, just to restate it, the fall sports, other than football, can do on-campus voluntary activities, and they are also allowed the 8 hours of virtual non-physical activity per the waiver. So those are the currently permissible items. The other issues will be discussed by the council next week.
And just as a follow-up to that, the Q&A was released yesterday, which kind of touches on just kind of based off of any action that came out from either all other sports as well as basketball, that just reconfirms what Ann is stating in regards to the council action as it pertains to extending the waiver for participation in the non-virtual countable athletically related activities. And again, just also providing the further clarification in regards to the June 1 action to allow for the voluntary activities.
Looks like we got a football-related question that's asking, well, it's for fall sports in general, but I'll answer from a football standpoint. If your first contest or game is canceled, can the institution still use that date to count preseason start dates? And from a football standpoint, if the cancellation or postponement occurs before an institution even begins its summer access, that would affect the first permissible start date for preseason practice. So it would therefore affect the start dates for summer access, because the first segment of summer access may begin 25 calendar days prior to the first permissible preseason practice date. The second segment of summer access that includes walkthroughs and meetings and increases the weekly hourly limit from 8 to 20, that can begin 14 calendar days before the first permissible preseason practice date. The thought here was that I guess the more difficult question is if an institution has already, let's say, started the first segment or started the second segment, and at that point the institution's first contest is scheduled, or the first contest is canceled, postponed, rescheduled, would that require an institution to change its approach with respect to summer access and preseason, or the timing of either? And there, we would just encourage you to reach out to us as you know, AMA staff with that specific question, because it's really one that we would probably look at on a case-by-case basis. But from the standpoint of games or contests that are canceled before an institution even begins summer access, that would affect the start dates for summer access in the preseason. For those that are canceled within one of those segments, please reach out to us and we can provide additional guidance.
So this is DJ, and I'd like to piggyback off of Jeff's comments to indicate that this is something that we've answered interpretively, and I am aware, based on some conversations with the Committee for Legislative Relief, that there are some waivers that are anticipated to be submitted to change the calculation of the first permissible date to start counting from the first scheduled contest to the first permissible date of competition. So that could be something that we see from a blanket waiver standpoint moving forward. Again, I don't think you can count on, from your calculation standpoint, determining the first permissible date of preseason practice based on the potential for a blanket waiver, but know that that is one concept that's out there and is being evaluated.
I'll just take a moment for those of you who are very strict rule followers. Now that we're some 40 minutes into the call, we obviously did not hold true to limiting questions specific to Bylaw 11. So if you have any others, 13 or 17 related, I think feel free to send those in at this time.
So we have a question that came in regards to the June 20th, 2019 interpretation as it pertains to the live streaming space. And we have been getting several questions in this space, and based off of conversations that have occurred within CCACA, as well as in the national office, this is a area that we are looking at, both from the impact of coaches not being able to go out and recruit and wanting to utilize those opportunities that the third parties are offering. But we're also looking at it from a broader standpoint as well, post-COVID-19. The hopes is, as we continue to collaborate with CCACA and our enforcement group on this, on the live streaming area, that we will have updates added into the Q&A document for in the future weeks. Hopefully we'll be able to get something in next week's Q&A. However, I'm not going to promise that, but we will continue to keep that as a topic of interest and discussion as it's circulating within the membership.
Catherine, as a follow-up to your question and as a reminder, that issue was what happens if the first contest day is canceled before we arrive on campus to start preseason practice. I think if that's happened to you and you want to discuss options before there's any sort of blanket relief, reach out to staff. I think you're familiar with staff, so reach out to staff and we'll try to help you through the options and possibilities at this point. Additionally, also talking about fall sports and reporting for preseason, there's a question that came in that really is specific to Bylaw 16, so I'm probably not going to answer it super directly. But the question is, what if we want to bring in student athletes earlier than the night before the start of practice for, say, COVID testing, et cetera? And so in general, I would say it's been emphasized that if it's for health and safety issues for the student athlete, there's a great deal of flexibility for expenses that can be provided. I would still encourage you, if that specific question doesn't get answered in the Q&A, and we can ask it if that's appropriate to include it. But I would encourage you to send that through RSRO so that you can get a really direct answer if you need one.
Thank you for participating in today's webinar. If you have follow-up questions regarding the information presented, please reach out to the NCAA staff. Thank you.